Hello, YouTube. My name is Tanea, and I am an ex-Jehovah's Witness. Um, I've contemplated for a long time about whether or not I wanted to share my story for so many reasons. One of them being due to the fact that I've seen so many powerful testimonies and so many things that a lot of you in the ex-Jehovah's Witness community had to endure. And I just felt like, compared to what you all have been through, I've probably been through nothing. But then I thought about it because I've seen a lot of stories, a lot of inspiring stories. And many of the ex JWs have left relatives behind. And so I wanted to reach those who may still be in the organization or may be contemplating leaving or may have even left, but do not have any relatives in the organization. I am one of those people. I was the only one in the organization, and I do not have any relatives there. But I will say this. I wanted to share my story because I wanted to let you all know that even if you don't have any relatives in the organization, the pain and the healing process is still the same. So I just wanted to reach those, and hopefully my story can inspire someone who may be in my situation where you were the only one in the organization and now you leave, and although you have your family, you still grieve alone because you don't have anyone to connect to. Your relatives can't understand what you're going through. And so that's what I'm here to share today. My story begins probably back in 2008 or 9. 2008, my grandmother had passed away. I was 20 years old, and her and I were very close. And at that time, I was living upstate New York with a cousin. And so I decided to come back to New York City, where I'm from, and stay permanently to be closer to my father, because that was his mother who had passed away. And a few months after she died, I started working for Chase Bank as a teller. And there's where I had my first encounter with a Jehovah's Witness. I had never heard of them before. I had no idea who they were, so I came into this blind. Around the winter of 2009, I had just turned 21. My coworker and I were getting very close. We were hanging out because we worked together a lot. So we would go to lunch together. We would go to dinner together and talk and laugh. And I didn't have my guards up. I didn't think anything of it because he would listen to the music I would listen to, which at that time was explicit. He had a lot of feminine qualities, so I looked at him as one of the girls. And we used to just have a good time. I did notice something different about him. He was very respectful. He had a nice way about him. All of the customers loved him. He spoke very well. And so we got along. And one day I think we went out to a restaurant or something, and because we had just turned 21, we decided to go for a drink. And there's where I started sharing my feelings about my grandmother and how I felt about her passing. And he showed me a magazine. It probably was the Watchtower and Awake. I didn't know what it was at that time. And it had mentioned something about our dead loved ones. But I wasn't thinking anything of it. I just was like, okay, thank you. And the night went on and we moved on. When I came back to work a couple of days later, because we both were part-time, he had mentioned to me that, he had shared my experience about my grandmother with one of his friends. And she really wanted to meet me and just, offer me a word of encouragement. And at that time, I had never had anyone say anything like that to me. So I was impressed. I was like, okay, sure, no problem. So he said, we set up a time and date. And when we met, it was in a Starbucks after work, because that's what we used to do, things like that. And she said, your coworker expressed to me that you were still grieving the loss of your grandmother, and I just wanted to offer my condolences, and said all these nice things to me. And she said, I would like to offer you a Bible study. Now, at that time, I didn't realize that they were Jehovah's Witnesses. I only agreed to the Bible study, not even because I wanted to or I didn't want to. It was just because this guy had been a really good friend to me. He was very nice to me. And I saw how happy he was, when we met, and I was just like, okay, sure, no problem. And prior to that, since I was a little girl, I always loved God. My mother was a believer. We weren't churchgoers, but we went occasionally, and I believed in a higher power. And I was taught, we have God. His son name is Jesus. When you die, you become an angel. You go to heaven, and that was that. And I used to go to church occasionally, but I never read the Bible. I had even gotten baptized in a church when I was younger, but they told me that was just to become a member. I had never really studied the Bible, so past the thought of thinking that, hey, when you die, you become an angel, you go to heaven, there's a God, that's it. I don't think I had a prayer life or anything of that nature. I just wasn't, religious, but I believed. So I accepted the Bible study. I was around 21 years old, and, they taught me about God's name being Jehovah. And when I saw it in my Bible and a few other Bibles that I had in the house, it had convinced me. So I started studying with them consistently, and that's when I realized these people were Jehovah's Witnesses, but they seemed to have all the answers to all the questions that I had. Where are the dead? I want to see my grandmother again. What happens in the future? All these things, every time I asked a question, they seem to have the answers in the Bible. And so, because I had never read the Bible on my own before, I wasn't able to compare and contrast any differences. And so I started studying, months went on, and I wasn't making any progress. I mean, I would cancel on them. I was irregular at times. And at one point, I just completely canceled the study. And it wasn't because I had a problem with it. It was just, I was just living my own life. I was busy, and that was that. And as time went on, I eventually quit my job at the bank, and I randomly moved to New Jersey with my sister, my cousin, and her best friend. And we all became roommates. And it was when I got there that I started thinking about the Bible study again, because my cousin and her friend, they kind of lived a crazy lifestyle, and I kind of wanted some order because I've always been, pretty much on the straight and narrow. So I remember writing it down on paper. I can't remember if I prayed about it, but I remember writing it down, and I said, "Dear God, if your name is Jehovah, I think I might need that Bible study again." And literally the next day, the Jehovah's Witnesses rang the doorbell. And my sister had knew that I had been studying somewhat, in the past. And so she screamed out the window, "Are you guys Jehovah's Witnesses?" And they said yes. So my sister said, "Tanea, why don't you go down there?" And I had gotten scared because I knew that I had just wrote it down on paper. I didn't know if God heard my prayer, and I just couldn't believe that they were there after I literally just wrote it down last night. And so I told my sister, "No, I don't want to go, you go." And she said, "No, it ain't for me, but I think you should do it." And so I went, and I had explained to the woman at the door that I had been previously studying before, and so she offered me a Bible study. And so I accepted. So her and I had gotten to like chapter 6 in the Bible Teach book, but she had took me back to chapter 1 just to start all over. And so I agreed. And we started studying, and after a few months, I started learning more, and I saw that she was a spiritual person. And it just wasn't working out with the whole roommate situation with my sister and my cousin and I. So we decided, we were going to go back to New York. And she knew, and she said, well, I don't think that's a good idea because you are becoming one of Jehovah's sheep, and Satan, sees that, and so he wants you to go back to New York to distract you. Every time someone starts studying, Satan throws distractions at them, and I think that, going back to New York is something that you should, consider not doing. So I, was like, well, if I don't go back to New York, there is nowhere else for me to go. That's where, my family is. And so I'm going back. I don't have a choice. So she said, well, I've been praying to Jehovah. You keep praying to Jehovah and let him open doors for you. Put your faith to the test. So I prayed. I prayed to Jehovah for guidance. I prayed for Jehovah, asked him what he wanted me to do. She said she'd been praying. And right, when it was time to leave, she had asked me if I would like to rent a room from her. And I told her, I wasn't working anymore, that I didn't have any funds, and that I, was not in a position to rent a room. And she was like, well, this is what she does. She rent rooms to other single sisters, and that she had faith that Jehovah would provide, and that I could stay there rent-free until an income came in, and then based on my income and what I could afford is what she would charge me. So I wanted my own independence anyway. I had liked what I was learning. They seemed to have had the answers to all of life questions, seemed to have some sort of guidance, in my life. And so I agreed. And so I rented a room from her. And that is where I got my first experience of realizing that, some Jehovah's Witnesses have mental issues. Because although this sister was kind and in the beginning, and she loved Jehovah and she went to meetings, she was very controlling. One of the other sisters that was renting a room from her and I had gotten very close, and we used to confide in each other in the way her behavior was. She was very rude. The sister would tell me every time I would leave the house, she would go and search my room and leave the door wide open. Every time I would leave the house, she would text me asking me where I was. She would do things like set up little traps to where I would have to come back home. I noticed that she was constantly drinking throughout the day, but she would put it in a teacup, but I would know that it was alcohol. She would have a lot of gatherings on Sunday evenings, and a lot of alcohol would be there, but she never had consideration for her roommates. She and I had agreed that although we would buy our food separately, we would share. But what she would do is she would buy all this low-fat food that I didn't eat, and then she would eat up all of my food, give my food to guests, and tell them, it doesn't matter, you don't have to ask her. She just had little respect. I saw a lot of control, and because I was a very expressive person, I would express to her, like, why are you doing these things? Why are you treating me this way? Why do you expect me to clean up after your mess when we're all adults? I don't care if you're working and I'm not. I clean up after myself, and I'll clean up in general, but there is no way I'm going to allow you and your daughter and other roommates to make a mess in the bathroom and pile up dishes in the sink, and I'm supposed to be the servant girl. That's not the agreement. I'm not a housekeeper. I didn't agree to work for my stay. I agreed to stay until I could work, and in the process, maintain my own cleanliness, and of course help around the house. But her and her daughter were not very clean people, and so I noticed that the other roommate was having issues with her, and it was just a lot of weird things going on with her. But in my heart, I felt she was a good person. It was just something weird about her. And so her and I were having a lot of problems because our thinking just didn't match. It was the level of control that she tried to have over me was becoming overwhelming. And so I would express myself, and we would go back and forth. And one day I came home, and she had a big eviction notice on my room door in a house full of guests. And so that caused a lot of drama between us. And I heard her on the phone telling her brothers, I wasn't baptized yet, I was just studying, how I was this crazy student, and how if I don't leave, she was going to call the cops. And I remember I had met one friend at the Kingdom Hall. She was about a year or so, two behind me, but we were in the same age group. And I had confided in her, and she had told her mother. And they had, warned me that previously other single sisters had lived there and had, had the same problem and the same sufferings with her. And they all had randomly left, and so that I wasn't alone to speak to the brothers about it. She said, you could go to the brothers about it. So I did, and one of the brothers, I feel, truly believed me because he knew how she was, and one of the other brothers did not because I was not baptized. And so rewinding in the middle of this going on with her and I, in the process, I had started working, I had started paying her rent, and so I was able to save money. So when she put that eviction notice there, didn't care where I was going. One day I was on the phone and she just called the cops out of nowhere and said I was threatening her. And these were all lies. And I could not believe that a Christian, someone who called themselves a Christian and had the true religion, would behave this bizarre. So I ended up, finding an apartment. And I was able to move out. The cops had told her that she had to give me 30 days, but I moved out. I had found a place within 2 weeks, and I had 1 month's rent and security because I had been saving, the past few months that I was there. And so it worked out in my favor. But I was a little bit discouraged because I couldn't go back to that Kingdom Hall where she was, because I was disturbed at how she tried to tarnish my reputation and how crazy she was. It wasn't that she didn't love Jehovah, but she had some sort of weirdness about her that I can't pinpoint. And all of that did not reveal itself until I moved in. And control and was a major problem. She wanted full control of my life, what I did, where I went. And I was not going to allow that because I had already had my own independence. So I moved into my own apartment. The new year rolls around. I'm trying to get settled in. And I just stay in limbo for a couple of months. I stay in limbo. Maybe even a year. I just stay out. But I always remembered Jehovah. I always yearned for it. And I never forgot it. I wanted to find God because what that woman had done for me was she taught me how to pray to Jehovah, how to rely on him. And when I got my apartment and things worked out for me, I felt that was Jehovah's hand in my life. So I was grateful for that. And so because of her behavior, I could not attend that Kingdom Hall. And so time went on. And I can't remember how old I was at this point, but I know that some time had went by. We're now in, I had started studying with her back in 2010. This went on between 2010 and 11 with her and I. By January 2012, I was in my own place. And so sometime in the middle of 2012, I was going to work one morning and I would see this Jehovah's Witness woman in the train station at the PATH train in New Jersey. And she would be there every morning like clockwork because I had to be to work at 7 o'clock. So I was out there at 6 in the morning. I would see her every day like clockwork. And I thought that was Jehovah's way of trying to speak to me. I said, maybe I should say something to her. And she would greet me and I would greet her, but she never offered me a magazine. She would have them in her hand. And one morning I saw her. I said, I used to study with Jehovah's Witnesses, and I explained to her my situation. And she said, well, where do you live? And I told her, and she said, well, I would love to, maybe meet with you and study. And so I gave her my number, and I told her to come back to the train station really, really early, like 5 in the morning. I don't even get up that early, but I just wanted to see if she was serious because I wasn't sure if, I wanted to do it again. But I knew I was yearning for Jehovah. And she was there. She was there, and she shared a magazine with me, and it says something like Jehovah wants us to come on home. And so it touched me. It touched me. And her and I started studying, and studying with her, I started learning more about, Jehovah, and I started feeling closer to Jehovah. And I joined the school. I gave my first talk. But in the process of studying with her, um, she was very negative, very negative. From the moment she saw me, the first study, she said, as Jehovah's Witnesses, our goal is not to be pretty and look like the world. We just want to serve God. And I've always been, a modest kind of person. I've always dressed appropriately. And she just always seemed to have something to say. She would say, if guys are trying to talk to you, then that means you don't look like a Christian. You look like the world. And I used to say, well, I can't control if I'm attractive, but I'm always modest. Even before becoming a Christian, it was just in my nature. I never wore, revealing clothes. And I don't condemn those who do, but it was just a part of my personality. And she was always very negative about what I'm wearing. And so I started losing my self-esteem because I didn't know how to dress, what to look like. I didn't want to look like an old lady because I was young, but I didn't want to look like I wasn't a Christian. And I started feeling like maybe guys shouldn't be looking at me. And, that's the first time where I started to really feel bad about myself. Everybody has their own insecurities, and I did, but that I always had confidence in my abilities and my ability to think and my ability to do things and be strong. And she just started tearing at that. We would go to assemblies, and she would say, don't go out for lunch because if Armageddon comes and them doors close, you're going to be out there destroyed with the world. It was just constant negativity, and I was finding myself becoming depressed. Even though I was learning about Jehovah because our studies were consistent. I was attending a New Kingdom Hall now, but every time we studied, it was always what we can't do, what we shouldn't do, how we shouldn't look, how we shouldn't dress, how we shouldn't speak, how we shouldn't be. Don't be yourself. I didn't know who to be anymore. I was always worried about Armageddon. Will I be destroyed if I'm not baptized? What about all of my relatives who don't know Jehovah? I would ask all these questions, and she would tell me, well, you just make sure you get there, and that's up to Jehovah. But the truth is offered to everybody, and if they don't want to accept, you just have to use your Bible-trained conscience because the conscience will accuse you or excuse you. And it was just constant negativity. Watch your association. Don't hang with this person, that person. So I didn't know who to hang out with in the congregation. Everything was just negative. Everything, and I used to tell her, listen, I'm an independent woman. I know how to think for myself. I know how to make decisions. Before coming into the organization, I had moral standards. I've always been this way. So learning about Jehovah only enhances me. It's not changing who I am because I didn't need to make drastic changes because I already lived a certain way prior to studying. So it wasn't difficult for me to become a Jehovah's Witness because I didn't have to give up anything really. So the negativity was draining me so bad, and but I still was praying to Jehovah, and I still believed it. And so I had wanted to become an unbaptized publisher, but I didn't even want to share that with her because I felt like every time I tried to move ahead, she was just so negative. But I fought it, and I told her I want to be an unbaptized publisher because I felt like no matter what other people felt, I'm going to still work on my relationship with Jehovah. For me, it was never completely about what I could get out of the deal as far as Paradise Earth or not wanting to die in Armageddon. It was personally wanting to know God. And I really thought that the resurrection hope was a beautiful thing. I did want to see my dead loved ones, but my motive for serving Jehovah was love for God. It was never about the promises or anything like that. And so, when I became an unbaptized publisher, I didn't know how it went. So she would not let me go in service with other people. I would ask her, could I go out with service with other people? And she would be like, no, the brother said just with me. And I just felt like I was not growing spiritually because I could not confide in her. I couldn't tell her my feelings because she had a hard exterior. And she was all about the book, the book, the book, the book. But there was nothing emotional about her. I needed someone to not only be my Bible study conductor, but also a friend. And she was not a friend. she just came, she read that book, showed me scriptures, and told me what we should not be doing. And I thought that the love of God is, you don't focus on, what you can't do, what you won't do, because you can't do any of the things that he wants you to do without him. So you come as you are and he does the rest. But it was just constantly condemnation, and feeling like I'm nobody unless I have the organization. I'm nobody unless I'm serving Jehovah. You're just dust is what I was told. You're just dust. And without Jehovah, you don't know where you'd be. You might be on drugs and a prostitute. And I told her I would never have been a prostitute on drugs, because I was not any of those things before studying, and I refuse to be any of those things now, whether I had come to know the truth about God or not. This is just who I am as a person. So don't tell me that I would be on drugs or a prostitute or in jail or a thief had I not known Jehovah, because I had friends who were not Jehovah's Witnesses, who were none of those things, who had moral standards, who had good conduct. And so I would go back and forth with her about that. And so the negativity had gotten so bad that I was starting to get depressed, that I decided that I would go to the brothers and tell them I need to study with someone else. But I didn't want to do it because what I had went through previously with the other sister, and I was starting to wonder, was I the problem? Was I the one that had issues? And this is why it was not working with me and any of my teachers, because things just was not working out. I couldn't seem to have good relationships. The people just seemed to be very negative. I was not thinking at that time that this was a negative environment. I just thought that I kept running into the wrong Jehovah's Witnesses. Even still, that had not stumbled me. I went to a brother who had been in my congregation. I was familiar with his face because he had been in the congregation that the other sister was in, who I was studying with the first time. And I told him, this woman is very negative. I don't have positive thoughts. I'm constantly thinking I'm going to be destroyed at Armageddon. I won't even go out at the assemblies because, she makes me feel like if the doors close, I'm going to be destroyed. If I don't sit with her and her family at the Kingdom Hall, that's a problem. And the control, I just couldn't do it. So he decided that, he would have his wife study with me. So the sister that I was studying with, I let her know that I wasn't studying with her anymore. And she told me that I had to tell her who I was studying with. That was the rules. That was the policy. And I refused. I went back to that brother and he said, you don't have to do that. We will handle that. So his wife now was my study conductor. And at this point, I was like, you know what? I'm tired of studying with people. I don't want to study anymore. And he was like, you have to finish the book. You have to finish the God's Love book. You're not baptized yet. You're only on the school and you're in the God's Love book. Usually people are baptized at this time. These are the things I was hearing. And so it was vital that I finish the study. And so his wife contacted me, I want to say 2 or 3 weeks later, because in the meantime, I had a breakdown at the Kingdom Hall and I started crying because I was just going through a lot. Emotionally, I was on my own and just was in need of direction and support. And that's when his wife was like, I'm sorry I didn't get back to you sooner. And I had recognized her previously. She would reach out to me at the hall, but I'm a very shy person. I would always say hi and bye to people and kind of fly out. I didn't really connect with anyone because there wasn't really many there my age. It was a lot of older ones or younger ones. And I just never really seemed to fit in with anybody. So that was another thing that started to mess with my confidence, because here we're supposed to be in the true organization where you have true friends, and I always felt alone even in the organization. It's just that I loved Jehovah, and as far as I was concerned, I saw his hand in my life. And so I continued for that reason, because they used to share scripture with me. I think it's in Mark somewhere, no one leaves mothers and fathers and houses, for the sake of the kingdom, who won't get more, and so I always knew that Jehovah would care for my needs. He would give me mothers and fathers, because I didn't have any of my family in the truth, quote unquote truth. I didn't have, even a lot of friends, but I felt that as I grew spiritually, because, when you're not baptized, even if you give a comment at the Kingdom Hall, they don't even call you sister or brother. They call you your name. So that's another thing that makes you feel uncomfortable, because they already let you know that you are not one of us because you are not baptized. You don't even get called sister or brother. Okay, and people wouldn't really associate with you if you weren't baptized, because you were still somewhat worldly. Even if you're coming to the Kingdom Hall, you're not baptized, and so people were still watching their association with you. And I would always say, okay, so I could be a monster, come get baptized, and you would associate with me just because I went under the water, but here I'm a good person, I'm sincere, I'm not living a double life, I have no desire to live a double life, and here people will watch the association with me because I'm not baptized. So I started seeing little things, but again, it was about me and my relationship with Jehovah. And what you will always hear from the Friends is, it's not a perfect organization. The Friends are imperfect, but the worst person in the organization is better than anybody in the world. And so you start to, even though it doesn't make sense, you start to, believe those things. And so, during this time I was studying with this new sister now. Well, we didn't get a chance to study, but she had a very soft demeanor. She was quite opposite of the other sister I had, where this sister was old-fashioned and very judgmental. This sister seemed to be more up to date, and she wore makeup, she dressed very nice, she had a younger personality. And so I was basically in the middle of that, where I'm not really into material things and lots of makeups. Not that I condemn those things, but it just wasn't me. And but I'm not an old lady either. And so with this sister, I noticed with her, she was all about recreation, but she never did anything spiritual. She would try to make me up and immediately pointed to, what I was wearing, because the other sister had messed my confidence up so bad that I started just wearing anything, and I was not looking good and youthful. And I don't know, the way I would go to the Kingdom Hall probably with just a long skirt and a t-shirt, not really putting any effort into it. And this sister, because she was all into fashion and things like that, she started pointing those things out. So now I'm getting discouraged again, because here one sister's telling me I look too worldly, and this sister is basically telling me I don't look worldly enough. I don't look, cute enough. I don't wear makeup. I don't wear high heels. I'm in these long skirts. So I didn't know who to be. I started losing my identity. But the difference between this sister and that sister is that this new sister, she was a little more attentive. She had more of a nurturing spirit. She was about my mother's age or a year behind her. So she had like a mother instinct to some degree as far as her nurturing skills, and I needed that because I was going through a hard time. I had just got laid off. I was in the process of losing my place. So her softness and being attentive was helpful, but I also needed spiritual things, and that is something that I noticed that she was not really into. We didn't have a study, but she would invite me out to recreational things. Her daughters fell in love with me. She had 2 young daughters. I loved them. I was like a big sister to them. I still love them. But there was something in my spirit that just didn't like her. I didn't know her enough not to like her, but something in my spirit was telling me there was something was wrong when I would be around her and her husband. I just couldn't pinpoint it. But being around, the Jehovah's Witnesses, you were always taught that the heart is treacherous, and, your thinking is not in line with Jehovah. So I didn't trust myself anymore. Whatever I thought, my intuition, I always did the opposite, because I started to believe from everybody else in my ear that my thinking was not in line with Jehovah's. I need to view people as Jehovah viewed them. And although they're imperfect, I had a very negative outlook on life and people, and that's because I'm coming out of Satan's world and I'm drawing close to Jehovah. And so my thinking is not like his, because his ways are higher than mine. And so this is what I was starting to believe, but it was very uncomfortable, because my mind was telling me my thinking is off with Jehovah, but my intuition, who I stood for as a person, was telling me something is off. And so I continued with the sister, and I was going through a bit of not a depression, but from what I had been through, what I was going through now, feeling alone. So I wasn't severely depressed, but I was a little down. So in the process, I had shared with her that, I was losing my apartment. My landlord, because I was such a good tenant, had let me go 6 months without paying rent, and now it was becoming too much, so I had to go. Um, so I had shared that with her, and she was saying things like, "Oh, you could find a job closer to home," like giving hints as if, I would stay with her. But it just wasn't making sense, the things she was saying. And I would say, well, I can't stay because, I have nowhere to go. So I come from a bit of a dysfunctional family, an ordinary family. We all have our ups and downs. So I didn't really want to go back. I wanted to, have my independence, on top of the fact I had become brainwashed in thinking that, my family was the enemy because they weren't serving Jehovah, and that I would be persecuted by them and I would lose my relationship with Jehovah because I was going to be around people who were not serving Jehovah. So I was trying to do everything in my power to stay around people who were serving Jehovah, even though these people were causing me grief. So I ended up losing my apartment. I go stay with my father's sister. I wasn't there a week. And because she has an addiction problem, she stole from me. So I packed my suitcase and I left. And at that point, it reassured me that, you know what? I need to be around Jehovah's people. I had still had the keys to my apartment, so I went back to my old place in Jersey, and I snuck into my apartment and I slept there overnight. I then 6 o'clock in the morning got up and left, and there was a 24-hour McDonald's. I sat in there with my suitcase and my iPad. That's all I had, because I think, no, my phone was still working. And I just was Googling help. Who can help me? Now, I didn't feel comfortable enough going to the brothers or anybody in the congregation about what I was going through or a place to live, because I hadn't developed relationships like that. I was still a little guarded because of what I had went through previously, and it seemed like every teacher I got had some sort of issue. So I was just trying to find my way, but I loved Jehovah. So the sister that I had was studying with prior to me being evicted and going to my relative's house, she had called, and I told her, you know what, I came back, and I had ended up meeting a man at one of these government offices who referred me to a homeless shelter. He had newer friends, so they gave me a bed because I had went to welfare, which I was instructed to go through, and they would not help me. So that guy really helped me. And they gave me a tour of the shelter, and it was like jail. It was a big room with 12 beds, lockers, dirty showers, and I felt I will do this to keep my relationship with my God, Jehovah. And so I did. And when that sister called me, I told her I was in a shelter. And so now that I'm aware of who they are, I don't think they told any of the brothers and sisters that I was in the shelter. What she did was she gave me the impression that she would have taken me in maybe, but I guess her husband was against it. I'm not really sure. I didn't care because remember that intuition I had about them, something was off. Told me I didn't want to go there anyway. Well, long story short, I ended up going to the shelter, and she would allow me to come in her home every day for a couple of hours. She would, feed me dinner. I had started collecting food stamps, so I would give it to her since I would be at her house every day, and I would see little behaviors about her that I didn't like, and again, ignoring, not trusting my own judgment again, because I was already convinced my thinking was off. So I would come to the house every day, things of that nature. And it was during that time, as about a month or two, that I decided I wanted to get baptized, because I had gone through all of that and I felt that I had overcome it, that Jehovah had made a way, that although I was in a homeless shelter, I still had somewhere to come every day. Although I was in a homeless shelter, the woman at the front desk gave me privileges that she didn't give other people, like extended curfews and personalized toiletries and things like that. And I felt that that was Jehovah taking care of me. So I wanted to dedicate my life to Jehovah. I had no bad intentions or anything. I felt like, you know what? It's when you have nothing that you draw closer to God, because you really see how he provides. And that's how I felt. And so I got baptized. This is now September of 2014. And it was 3 days before my birth date that I could no longer celebrate. So, getting baptized was like a new birth date for me. And it was the evening of the baptism when I first realized I was not sure about these people, because she had asked me for a list of people to invite to my baptism dinner, and when I got there, no one was there. Only the people, the sister that I had initially studied with from my coworker, and the people she brought with her, and the rest was this sister's, all of her friends. And now I'm getting baptized and all of this. Now her and I had never had a study. She was all about recreation. I was building my relationship alone with Jehovah, but she was a nurturer, and I needed that at the time. And so although we wasn't having studies, I was saying something is wrong with this picture. You're supposed to be my study conductor, and although you're being nurturing, you're inviting me in your home every day, we're not opening the Bible. You know, I saw them going to meetings. There was a routine of meetings, but there was no, her husband was an elder. There was no Bible study. There was no family study, no personal study, nothing. Life was all about recreation and partying and, you know, gatherings. And that was, they were social, they were climbing the social ladder of the organization. And you know, they were very popular. People wanted to be around them. And so a lot of people tried to befriend me just to get in with that crowd. And I had to learn, you know, that as well. But anyway, so after I got baptized, they asked me to move in, and I told them no. One, I had already gone through this before. I was not about to do that again. She had knew the situation and the sister that put me through it, and I told her I could not take that risk again. Secondly, I had become accustomed to being in a shelter, and I felt that if Jehovah had provided this far, he would continue to provide. And her husband has said to me, well, how would you feel if Jehovah keeps offering you gifts and you keep denying it, and he stops giving you gifts? So it made me feel bad. I said, well, I don't want Jehovah to deny me blessings. I love Jehovah, and I don't want to reject any blessings Jehovah has given me. But my intuition was telling me, do not move in with these people, because I saw little things about them that just didn't seem spiritual. And so I said, listen, I don't have any money. I don't have a job. I can't afford to pay rent. I cannot stay. They assured me that all of that was okay. I asked, did I have to pay rent? Was there a time frame? Nothing. You're all good. Because I said, I went through this before and I can't go through this again. I would be leaving the shelter, and after the shelter, if I give that up, that was a gift that I got. There's nothing for me. And they assured me. And so they had a 3-story house. It was a brownstone building, but I didn't have my own room. I slept on a blow-up bed in the living room. And just so you know, when I got there, you know, that's when his wife was very passive-aggressive. She did a lot of subtle, mean things. She was very insecure with her husband. Her husband had offered me a job, and I guess that affected her. So him and I were working together. She was very jealous. She would do petty things like, you know, cook food, make his plate. When I come home, there wouldn't be any for me. Then she had her days when she was very nice and want to feed me. I was only making $9 an hour traveling from New Jersey to New York, so it cost me about $15 a day. I was only working 20 hours. Her husband had bought me lunch one time, and I came home so excited. Oh, he brought me lunch, because I used to call him dad. He used to call me daughter. She never really, you know, took to the mom part. She tried to, but not like he did. And I thought this was my family, because that's what they made me feel like. We're a family, you know, I'm your spiritual mom. This is your spiritual dad. I know you don't have that. You're a big sister to my girls. And the girls loved me, but she was just, once I started working with her husband, she just was very mean to me. But it was very subtle, where if I explain it, you wouldn't get it. But I know, and God knew what she was doing. Very, very mean. She would cause little problems between us and then make it to her husband like, you know, it was me. I would get so depressed that I wouldn't eat for days. And then she would nurse me back, make me, like, give me medicine to get better. And as soon as I got better, she would do something to just tear down my self-esteem. She would tell me, get your hair done, do this, do that, knowing I didn't have money. Every time I felt confident about something, she would tear it down. She just, you know, she knew that I wanted to learn how to drive, get my license, and she had promised to teach me. In the process, she had gotten a new Bible student and was praising her, and everything I did wasn't good enough. She taught her how to drive behind my back. She was just very mean, and me being expressive, I would always ask, why? You know, I was so confused, because on one hand, you're so mean, but then when I get sick, you take great care of me. I don't understand. What is the problem? Do you think I want your husband? I used to dress in sweatsuits. I would take showers before he got home just to be out of the way. And if he was home, I wouldn't take a shower, just to show her, like, you are the woman of this house. I did everything I could to put myself in a child's place. Not that I wanted to be a child, but just so that she wouldn't feel like it was two women in the house, just so she didn't feel intimidated by my presence. And so it was just, nothing was good enough for her. It would take a long time for me to express what I went through. It was a lot of psychological abuse in that house. There was nothing spiritual happening. Like I said, no studies, no nothing. I was on my own spiritually. There was a routine of meetings. They went to the meetings all the time. They went to assemblies, but assemblies for them was about getting new outfits and it being a social gathering. They never talked about Jehovah, never talked about spiritual things. Everything was a routine, and I was feeling depressed spiritually. I couldn't grow. I had dropped down to 80 pounds. It was really bad. The whole time I was there, she never did a thing to help me. She never gave me money. She never helped me buy a shirt. I struggled and suffered while I was in her house. And she has a good job, making six figures, and her husband was the store manager. And he knew what I was making at 9 an hour. So, I would always have issues with her because she would create issues as soon as her husband came in the door. Like, there were times where she would be mean, and then when he comes around, act nice. And then times where she would be really nice, and when he came, act like I did something to be the victim. And so it got to a point where, she was like, I'm tired of your nonsense or whatever, and had told me, I had to leave. And I was stressed out because I had only been here a month, but all of this is happening in a month because it seemed as if, because I was headed towards, she thought I was young and she could put makeup on me and change me, but I was really driven towards spiritual things. I was the only one every Saturday morning going out in field service in that house, going on return visits, doing all I can for Jehovah after work, things like that. And they were not. And I didn't understand how her husband was an elder. He knew what I was going through. He saw the pain. He never sat down, talked to me. He was into his job, and they were into fashion. Nothing spiritual in that house. Very competitive with other people, very insecure, competition, always this sister wore that because I wore that, into all these things that I just was not into. And it was draining. And so I said, I don't have anywhere to go. She said, well, you got 2 weeks. Within that 2 weeks, I went to her husband. I said, I don't know what I did wrong. I'm respecting your house. I get along with your girls. I go to the meetings. I'm going out in service. What am I doing wrong? He says, you're doing absolutely nothing wrong. When 2 women is in the house, it's always like that. But, we're not going to see you out on the cold. This is December, so you'll have to leave by March. So from December and March, I wanted to leave. My pride wanted to leave. But I had confided in a sister who said, this is a test of your loyalty to Jehovah, and see what doors Jehovah open. And I just felt like, how could I be in a house with people who don't want me here, who took me out of a shelter, no time frame, to turn around and treat me this way and do mean things. She would tell me, don't buy ice cream because I'm on a diet. Don't put this in the refrigerator. And I would deprive myself, but yet her husband would put ice cream in the freezer, things of that nature. And I just felt like, she didn't like me because I was not into the things she was into. I was leaning towards spiritual things, and they were just content with what they appeared to look like on the outside. And so I went through a lot in that house. It would take too long for me to explain everything that I went through, but I started suffering from deep depression. So from December to March, the relationship between her and I had gotten better, not because she changed as an individual, but I changed. I stopped going back and forth with her. I let her get away with whatever she wanted to do. She mistreated me, I overlooked it. She did something petty, I ignored it. And I kind of fought for our relationship to be better because I needed peace until I could figure out where I was going. So at that time, I had got another job. I had got like $1 or $2 raise. And I still wasn't in a position to afford an apartment, but I knew I could probably rent a room or something. And so when March came, as time was going on and I thought our relationship got better, I didn't think they would really see me out, on the street. But I knew that I had to go because I wasn't making progress in that house. It was just like so much hypocrisy. And I don't know if I can't describe it, but just like the spirit in that home was not one of God. God's spirit was not in that home. And so I was 80 pounds, depressed. I felt like I developed an eating disorder. And I felt like she knew that she was causing me grief. And she didn't care, because what it seemed like they knew the ins and outs of the organization. I did not. I was new. And so they knew what they could and could not do, and what would exploit them and what wouldn't. They knew that I wouldn't tell, because I didn't want to tell, because I didn't know if what I was seeing and what I was going through was real, because I was already convinced that my thinking was off. I'm a depressed person, and that's why I can't allow people to love me. And I had finally, when March came and I brought it up to her, I said, I know you said, I have to leave, but I have nowhere to go. She said, well, I'll talk to my husband. And he gave me a 2-week extend. So I went to the brothers. I told her, I said, I'm going to the brothers because I need help. At this point, I started developing relationships, and I felt like I was going to tell the brothers. But when I went to the brothers, I told them, I need to leave, and they want me out, and I have nowhere to go. And the brother said, well, ask them, can you stay a month? Just know that you're not going to be homeless. We're going to find you somewhere to stay. And he said, what can you afford? So I said, I really don't know, but I can't afford a lot. If somebody could just rent me a room. I don't want to live with a married couple, maybe a single sister, until I get on my feet. And I said, I really don't want to live with any witnesses, but I need somewhere to live. These people have no remorse as to where I'm going. She even told me, you didn't tell anybody about your situation. So this brother told me, you go to the brother and you ask him to stay. I said, I will not do that when they told me I had to leave. He said, well, humility is not made to feel comfortable. So I did it, and it was very uncomfortable. And he told me 2 weeks. And so within that 2 weeks, I ended up, the brother ended up finding a sister whose father had a place, and he had an attic apartment available. And I said, you know what? I will take it. They told me what the price range was. It was a bit of a struggle, but I knew I could afford it. So I went to see the apartment, and this apartment was a dungeon. It was a dungeon. And I told him, I have 2 weeks to get out. I'll see if I can stay somewhere until the first of the month. You just get the house together, and then, we'll go from there from the first of the month. I calls him. When it's time to move in, he says the apartment is clean. I'll be there such and such time to take the 1 month's rent and security. So I had got there at the time, and his daughter goes, oh, my dad had a sudden appointment to go, but you can give the 1 month's rent and security to me, and I'll take you upstairs. Here's the keys. Well, lo and behold, I get upstairs. This man has done nothing to this attic apartment. It is old furniture everywhere, spaghetti sauce, dirt on the walls, roaches running around, mice everywhere, mice droppings. He had not touched the apartment, but he had his daughter take my 1 month's rent and security. Now I'm stuck in this place. I can't leave. He gave him my money. I'm even more depressed because these people didn't have the decency to see me, go somewhere. And now I'm going crazy. Like, all these people are supposed to be Jehovah's Witnesses, and this is what they do? This is how they treat people, especially their own brothers and sisters. And that other sister, she came to the house. As much as she kicked me out, she was as if she was so happy I had an apartment. Like, I wasn't stressed in the process. Like, she didn't kick me out. It was, oh, you see how Jehovah answers prayers? Oh, I'm so happy for you. Like, you didn't cause me grief and see me with nowhere, and I had to rush and take the first thing I saw. So she didn't offer me a blow-up bed, not a sheet, not a plate of food, nothing. And I was good to this girl. Her daughters were crying when I moved out, because I was not only their big sister, but I was nurturing them, because I know they were in pain too. They just couldn't express it. But they were not really good parents. And they brought them things. They had a lot materially, and she bragged about that, what she had. She made everybody feel beneath her. Oh, I have this. She didn't struggle. She didn't, she had it all together. And so, when I moved in, I was like, how is this love? But I stuck around because I felt alone. I didn't know if what I was thinking about them was true. But what I did learn as time started going on is that a lot of people were saying negative things about this family. Everybody said the same thing about them. They're not spiritual. They don't go out in service. They do this. They cause grief on this person, that person. But then you have so many people wanting to be in their cliques. And I had no desire for the cliques, that I was confused. Are these people good or not? And then it was like, on one hand, she would do these mean things, but then it was like she would be so nice. I to this day, am very confused. Anyway, as time went on, because I couldn't express myself, because I thought, it was me and blamed me, and after I left and I still saw the same pattern of behavior with them, I started to realize this is not me. This is who you are as people. I got very depressed. very, very, very depressed. I would go to meetings miserable. I stopped going to the assemblies because they would always have parts, and I didn't understand how somebody who was an elder and a wife who got caught going to clubs and all of that would still have his position, and that they would get all these parts on the assemblies when they never went out in service. She drove him to work every Saturday morning. They never did anything spiritual, but they would get all this recognition and praise every time the circuit overseer came. They would always get parts on assemblies, and I felt like here I am serving Jehovah alone, no family, by myself, young, single, sincerely loving Jehovah. And I would see people, give comments at the meeting and then talk about the person right after they, gave the comment, or indirectly give comments at the meeting. Or people would just had a routine, but nobody was serving Jehovah from the heart. And these were all the people that were getting all the demonstrations, all the parts on the assemblies, and all the recognition when the circuit overseer came in here. We called ourselves the underdogs, the ones who were out in service, who had Bible studies, who were sincere, who would take no part in those cliques, who were doing everything right, just did not get acknowledged for what they did. And I got tired of that. And I noticed every time I would go to the Kingdom Hall, I would start getting depressed. I didn't want to be in that hall. But I thought it was the truth. And everybody would always say, well, where else you going to go? Out in the world? I believed that it was the truth. And I loved Jehovah, but I didn't know how much longer I could endure his people. And they would say, well, Jehovah saw something in them. And I know I can't judge, but I would say Jehovah saw something in these people. The hypocrisy, the things that the friends were doing, the way people were coming to the meetings, not speaking to each other, disrespecting other people through comments. This is a praise to Jehovah. You don't think Jehovah know where that comment is coming from? None of the comments were heartfelt. I just saw a lot of disturbing things. All the competition between the sisters, the fact that, if you were elder's wife and you have children, you were like celebrities, and, those who were just regular people were nobodies. And, people would condemn me because I was single, but I was content in my single state. But when I saw the marriages and what the brothers felt that wives had to do and be in subjection, I used to pray to Jehovah that, I'm not that kind of woman. Relationships are 100%, 100%. I never saw how my life would be good in that organization because I didn't connect with anybody, because I saw people, I saw sisters, very young sisters marrying older brothers. I saw brothers with mental retardation marrying sisters, and I'm not judging, but I just saw weird things that went against who I was and went against my integrity. So I used to feel even alone in the organization because everybody that I was subjected to was doing things that went against what I stood for. And so that was another struggle that I had. I saw sisters dating brothers after 3 and 4 months and marrying them. I saw people pairing people up, and I always felt that I was woman enough and lovable enough to have Jehovah find someone, send someone to me who would notice me, who would be attracted to me, not because somebody went to another hall and found him for me. And so I wouldn't go to those gatherings with other sisters. A lot of the sisters would dress up for the conventions as a means to look for brothers. I went for the spiritual feast, and I always felt that if Jehovah saw somebody for me, he would do that. But because of what I went through in that family, that whatever happened to me there, I could not overcome that. So I stopped going to assemblies because we were in the same circuit. I would go to my meetings here and there. I stopped going to the memorial 2 years ago because we were in the same circuit, and I refused. People that I knew was hypocrites would get all this recognition. I refused to be a part of it. They weren't in my congregation anymore. They had left, so I was okay with going to the meetings, but it got to a point where I would go to the meetings and hear the same negative talks, the same thing over and over. My life just was not progressing. I lost myself. I didn't know how to believe in myself anymore, think anymore. Everything, I couldn't make a decision without not trusting myself or asking someone else. And I would always ask a Jehovah's Witness who would give me advice that would end up not being for my benefit. And I was just lost. And I got to a point where I said, you know what? I'm tired of going. I'm not coming to the meetings anymore. But I knew I still loved Jehovah in my heart. And one day I just begged Jehovah. I said, Jehovah, what is wrong with me? Help me. I've been hurt before. What is it about this family? What have they done to me that I can't let go of the anger and rage? I can't stop lashing out on her. I can't stop being hurt. I can't stop crying about everything they put me through. It's affecting my relationship with you. I don't want to be in the hall. Jehovah, you gotta help me. Now, I had never gone on YouTube before or anything. And I don't know what moved me. One day I just went on YouTube. Even though they were saying the whole watch what we watch on the internet, I had an old soul, so I didn't have social media. I really wasn't looking. I believed it was the truth. I never questioned the doctrine. I never had a problem with the lifestyle or anything like that. I had a problem with the people and what was going on, but I was okay with serving Jehovah. I didn't question doctrine. I didn't have those thoughts in the back of my mind, is this not the truth? I truly believed that this was the truth, and I truly saw Jehovah's hand in my life. I felt that I had a wonderful relationship with Jehovah. It was the organization, the people that was causing me distress, and people kept saying, you're not here for the people, you're here for Jehovah. But it was unbearable. And like I said, what I went through in that home was just, I felt that it was them, but now that I'm out, I realize it was them, but it was the negativity from the organization, because I believe that that organization is ran by Satan. And so the spirit that we are all under in that organization is why we are miserable and depressed. That is my belief. And so when I went on YouTube, I saw a Jehovah's Witness testimony, and I immediately cut it off because I thought I was an apostate. That, you know what, I am going against Jehovah. I should not be looking at people criticizing Jehovah. And because my smart TV was connected to my iPhone, some way, somehow, it popped up on my TV. I turned it off my TV. And I just went back on YouTube. And I listened to that story, and I could connect with that woman in so many ways that all I could do was cry. So I started binge watching YouTube and listening to all the testimonies. And it was through YouTube that not only helped me to wake up, but helped me to realize that I was not crazy, that this was not the truth. And so I cannot tell you how liberating that made me feel, how free I felt. But at the same time, all these emotions that came over me, I was crying like a baby. I was shocked. I couldn't believe it. I was still angry. I wouldn't go, even though I'm not going to the Kingdom Hall anymore. I'm not going to church. I just didn't know who to believe, who to trust, anything. And so I kept watching for days and days. I couldn't go to work. I called out for a week straight. I couldn't clean up because I was in awe. So on one hand, I'm feeling like free. The other hand, I was on an emotional roller coaster. It was a mess. But I just want to give all of you, I want to thank all of you in the ex-Jehovah's Witness community for sharing your stories, because you guys not only helped me to wake up, but you helped me through the pain. I'm still going through it, because once I realized that this wasn't the truth, and I lived in a building full of Jehovah's Witnesses, I packed my bags, and because I still looked at my family as the enemy, I put my stuff in storage, and I went to another city in upstate New York and lived in a hotel for a week, because I was like, I'm not coming back to my family. I will start all over again. I will try to make it on my own. But I prayed and prayed and prayed, and I decided to show up on my aunt's doorstep. And my aunt welcomed me with open arms. My family didn't ask me any questions. Where you been? Because I hadn't seen them in so long. I wasn't celebrating anything. I wasn't really in touch with them. Nobody asked me a thing. They all were just so happy to see me. They threw parties. We might have partied every weekend, every day when I first came back, celebrating and just having a good time and living life. And I got to have spiritual conversations with my relatives and my cousins. And for the first time, I saw my family for who they were. Imperfect they are, but as people, as human beings, and that they love God too, and that they had a spiritual side too. Now I get to sing gospel with them, and we talk about scriptures together, and things. They don't have a lot of Bible knowledge, but they're believers. And for once, I started to view people with a different perspective. And I still watch the YouTube videos, and that's why I was compelled to share my story. It may be a run-on sentence. It may not move any of you. What I've been through takes more than just a YouTube video to explain, but I just wanted to share my story. Perhaps it could help even one person, and just to express my gratitude for all of though all of you who shared your story and your testimony, who helped me wake up, who's still helping me go through the grieving process, because my family do not understand it. There are some in the Kingdom Hall that I still love and miss. You know, I am not disfellowshipped. I am not disassociated. My lifestyle is still the same. I still love God. I still read my Bible. I just see the gems, the beautiful gems in the Bible now that I didn't see in that Jehovah's Witness Bible. I learned what grace was about. God's grace, not undeserved kindness. I'm more than just dust. I'm more than a conqueror. You know, there's victory in Christ, and I'm just grateful that God saw something in me and all of you and many more to come, that he, you know, opened our eyes. Because what that religion does is that you could leave an atheist, because I almost did, because that was my life and my foundation. Because you have all these questions all over again. The questions that you thought they answered, you have them again. I know I did. And now the Bible was starting to become just a book of fairy tales to me, because nothing made sense to me anymore. Nothing. And then I started hearing other beliefs and so many things that people are into that I wasn't open to because I was afraid. And there's some things that I still won't dive into, you know, based on who I am. But all you know is that organization. And so you are afraid of anybody who comes in the name of God, or even in the name of Jesus for that matter. And that's where I was and where I still am to some degree. But reading the Bible on my own, I have been convicted personally. And I have reflected on the fact that when I was in those dark hours, even as a Jehovah's Witness, when I was praying, somebody heard me. And that same person heard me and woke me up out of that organization. And as someone said to me, that organization was my tutor. It gave me the desire for God. You know, it trained me on how to read the Bible, because reading the Bible was helped me to realize that this is not the truth, that this organization is in fact a cult. And my heart aches for those who have dedicated their lives years and years. My heart aches for those who are sincere, because you have some very evil people in that organization who know it's not truth. And some do believe it's truth, but they're just caught up in the routine. And I say that organization recruits the naive, the brokenhearted, and the wicked, because there are very wicked people in that organization, just like there are good people in that organization. And since I've been out of that organization, I've been back with my family. Although it's not perfect, it was a blessing. My family did not condemn me. My family didn't judge me. Till this day, they have not asked me why I came back. Why do you need to live here? The door was just open, and my life has been moving on. I'm dealing with my own issues as far as, you know, the healing process. But for the most part, God has really, you know, taken care of me. And I've been praying for the Jehovah's Witnesses, for the sincere ones. And, you know, for those who just got so caught up in routine, I can understand how that organization could really create a monster out of you. I pray that God change their hearts. I really do. But I'm grateful to be free. I feel free. I feel happy. Yes, there are people there that I love and miss. Yes, I am contemplating whether I want to write a disassociation letter or not. I'm not really sure. I don't really care about that. I'm just grateful to be free. But for all those who say, if you're grateful that you don't have family. Yes, in one aspect, I am grateful because my family still get to talk to me. But the people that have become my family do not. Okay, the moment I stopped coming to the Kingdom Hall, my phone stopped ringing. And none of them know that I realize that this is not the truth. I've tried to share one with one sister who I used to talk to, because I knew that she was living a double life. And I felt like if she knew that this was the truth, she basically told me how depressed I was and don't take it out on Jehovah, and I'm leaving because I'm hurt. When in all actuality, I'm leaving because I found out that it wasn't truth. And so I feel I can't help anyone leave, at least not right now, or telling them that it's not the truth, because the first thing they're going to think is because before I left, I was in a depression. And so at this point, you know, I'm working on rebuilding my life. I've gotten 3 jobs and quit them. I am at a point in my life where I'm trying to rebuild and begin. I want to go back to college because I dropped out when I got in that organization. And I just want to do everything that makes me happy. I spent years in that organization doing things that didn't make me feel good, going against who I was because I was trying to please God, and I thought I was by going against what I felt internally. So whatever makes me uncomfortable, I don't do it. You know, and I know I can't use as an excuse forever, but as of right now, it works for me. If something does not make me happy, I do not do it. I'm doing whatever makes me happy. So this is where I'm at now, trying to just rebuild. You know, I'm dealing with my spiritual life, rebuilding that because I was spiritually robbed. My education, I'm signing up to go back to school for the fall and follow my dream. And you know, I always wanted to, you know, go to school for journalism, and I'm going to do everything that I want to do. And I'm still single, and I look for, you know, the time when God blesses me for with a husband. All those things I know will come to me, but the most important thing is I'm grateful that I am free. And I thank everybody on YouTube for sharing their stories, because you guys really helped me. You really helped me. And I am for all those who may still be struggling, I'm in need of support. I'm here to support those who may need support. And I just want to let the XJW community know that I love you all very much. And thank you so much for your testimony. Thank you.